Okay, hello everybody. As promised, I'm going to be doing these online recordings for you guys to engage with the final learning unit for the first semester of English 3A. This is going to concern the book Cold Comfort Farm by Stella Gibbons, written in 1932, and it's also the last text we do as part of our course on modernism this semester. Although it's a little ways away, when we do our second semester, we actually do a module called postmodernism. And we look at texts and literature and films that come after modernism is quote unquote finished. So this is a book, as I said, written by Stella Gibbons, an English writer, and it kind of marks, I would say, the end period of modernism. You know, after we've looked at Mrs. Dalloway, The Wasteland, Henry James. I think you can see that in comparison, this book does have features of modernism in it, but in a very different way. It's very unlike those other texts, comparatively speaking. In this recording today, I'm going to be looking at a little bit about the author, going to outline the plot. I'm going to introduce you, I think, to the main theoretical idea you need to know concerning the book, which is parody. Okay, so parody is the kind of the central framework that you look at this book through, alongside, of course, modernism. So as I've said a couple of times before, in your POE, when you're tackling each question, make sure that you can demonstrate for each learning unit that you know how that particular book in question is a modernist text and take it from there. So when you look at something like Cold Covered Farm, you've got to show that you can see in what ways it is modernist, but also in this case, you need to look at how it functions as a parody, what a parody is, what it does, and how this particular book is won. So here's a quote to kind of get warmed up with. Just see here. You might recognize the guy in the picture. There's being, I think his name is Marlon Wayans. He's a kind of a guy who I grew up watching a lot, a comedian, an actor, did lots of funny stuff, and starred in a whole bunch of movies that were rip-offs or parodies of other more serious, like thrillers, cop movies, and mostly horror films. And so he knows what he's doing when it comes to parody, because this is his wheelhouse and his genre. And he said that with parody, you're referencing and sending up a particular genre. And most important, and mostly your material is going to be taken out of that genre. So that's Marlon Wayans. Just to pay attention to a couple of the words that you see there. You're referencing and sending up a particular genre. Okay, genre being a style or mode of storytelling that has certain features we expect it to have. A horror movie unfolds in a certain way. It has particular characters. It has certain events that we expect to happen, right? We don't know exactly what's going to happen, and that's part of the interest, is the variation across the genre. But underpinning any genre are all of these codes or conventions that we expect to be present in the story. Um, Oftentimes, over a long period of making these sorts of genre films, the genre becomes quite samey or boring, calcified, because it starts to be a bit exhausted. It goes a certain, it can go only so far. Then after, at a certain point, it becomes quite boring. And it's usually at that point where it becomes boring or expected or samey that it also becomes ripe for parody. So it becomes something people start using. The features are repurposed to make us laugh at the features rather than to take them seriously. So what that means usually is that you need an audience who understands what the reference is, who understands what the parody is making fun of. In order for the joke to work in a parody, you need to know what the text is originally making fun of, actually, right? And all of the material in the parody is actually taken out of that genre. It's just repurposed. It's been given another different, ridiculous, absurd kind of a spin. Those things have been taken as far as they can. They have been made as entertaining as they can be made to be, and just reached a certain point where they are drained of any newness or novelty or interest. And usually at that point is when the parody comes in and somebody starts to actually use those elements in a fun, satirical, humorous, absurdist kind of a way. So that's also a little bit modernist, isn't it? Remember the modernist motto being make it new? What a parodist does is they take something old, something that is now kind of hollowed out and boring, dull, and they turn it on its head, they flip it over, they make it new, they find a new energy in it, they repurpose what's there, they upend our expectations, they take something we expect and turn it into something unexpected. And it's in that flip that we kind of find a new energy or interest. The energy in this case being something funny, something humorous. We laugh at the thing instead of taking it seriously. So here's a definition of parody. Gibbons uses it to tell the story that we're going to be reading here, to write the characters and create the overall tone of the novel. What a parody is, I would say, is an artistic creation. So it is something that is created. It's not plagiarism. It's not necessarily just a rip-off, but it is actually a unique creation in itself. But it's the main thing it's doing is to imitate another genre, another thing, make fun of or comment on a previously original work, right? Whatever feature happens to suit the parody. It could be its subject, the author, the style in which it's done, or some other target it has that it wants to hit. And this is usually by means, again, of imitation that is satirical or ironic. By satirical or ironic, I just mean these are kind of interchangeable terms, but they basically mean I'm making fun of something. I'm poking fun at it. I'm spoofing it. It's a lampoon. These are other words we have for parody. Parody and satire are not necessarily exactly the same thing, but they do go hand in hand. Satire is like, I would say, usually something that tries. A satire is when a writer or creator makes something that is intended to target much more powerful people or institutions or cultures in order to cut it down to size, or in order to show a regular audience just how silly or ridiculous those powerful people or institutions are. And a satirist can use parody in that mission. So I would say parody is kind of seen as a tool, as a means that somebody, a creator, writer, musician, whatever, employs in order to make fun of something more powerful or something dominant in the world, a dominant narrative, a hegemonic narrative or force, an institution, a person, politicians, celebrities, people who are regarded as having some sort of an influence over the rest of us are usually the ones that the satirists go after. One of the tools in their toolbox is to use parody in order to do that. Okay, so usually it's meant to be comic or humorous, and its characteristics are that it can exaggerate certain traits, using the kind of same techniques as maybe a cartoon caricaturist would. So there's another word you might have come across, which is also interchangeable with like a satire. Parody is caricature, is that you create an image of somebody or something in an extremely exaggerated, over the top way. It still has a grain of truth to it, but it's kind of, how would you say, kind of taking back control of somebody's image and making fun of them in a way. And you'll see this in satire all over the places, whether it's satire in cartoons, newspapers, in the media, now more online, of course. But these terms like caricature, parody, spoof, lampoon, imitations, satire, these things all are present in the text that we're looking at. They might all be slightly different, but they certainly fit together as doing more or less the same thing ultimately, which is to laugh at something powerful. And in laughing at something powerful, making fun of it, you actually reduce the amount of power and influence that target has over society. That's the idea anyway. If you look at kind of very authoritarian countries, places where people don't have a lot of free speech, very often the kind of dictatorial leaders will go after those most fiercely who make fun of them, right? Those are the ones they fear the most. They fear being laughed at. They don't like the idea of laughter. I remember last year we in English second year we did a kind of a variation on Emperor Has No Clothes story when the emperor who's naked is laughed at by a child, right? And that is the greatest fear of powerful people, is to be laughed at by people of a lower station than them. And that is what satire, parody, caricature, that's the power that it gives us, is that it allows us a way to laugh at people more powerful than we are. And so it diminishes the mockery, diminishes the sway they have over us. Okay, so parody is an imitation of any medium genre way of thinking, the intention to mock and diminish that thing. Today we'll look at a little bit of how parody emerges in Cold Comfort Farm, look at just a couple of brief examples of it, and I'm also going to give you one more ice task to do, which will be quick to do, I think. Here's a few examples of parody just out there in the world that are a little bit more modern and familiar to you. Like 50 Shades of Grey was a series of kind of romantic books written by E.L. James, very, very popular. So popular it turned into movies. Then there's Marlon Wayans in his satirical version of it, 50 Shades of Black. As you can see, there's an imitation thing going on, right? Where it copies the elements of something, the seriously done elements of something here on the left are copied, imitated, and turned into something slightly exaggerated or with a different spin on them. And in so doing, you kind of realize how silly and stupid the seriousness of the original one was. And I think we're going to see that this is basically what Cold Comfort Farm does, is that it mocks the seriousness of other genres as a way to show you how silly and misguided and over the top the original things were. Here's another one, like this is the movie called The Conjuring. Yeah, I think I did watch it. It's actually a pretty scary film. But as we know, the horror movies like this, they all have their own tropes and cliches. And we expect certain conventional things from them. And so it's quite easy to take those features, imitate them, and turn them into something quite different and silly, over the top, ridiculous. Marlon Wayans and his kind of film production business did all of these spoofs, lampoons of various American horror movies, like I Know What You Did Last Summer, and what was the other one I've forgotten? Kind of slasher movies. Slasher movie was big in the 90s and early 2000s, and they were pretty serious films, and so they had these very kind of particular conventions to them. They were the same sort of movie over and over again, just endlessly repeated. And when you have that repetition, it's easy to make fun of it because everybody knows what's going to happen in the movie, more or less. Everybody kind of expects certain things to happen. And so when you make a spoof of it, you simply deploy an imitation of those expectations, but you put a little spin on it, and in putting a spin on it, you create something new. The newness gives it a freshness or a different energy, and that energy usually emerges in the form of laughter. It's funny. They're making fun of it. And it also flattens the seriousness of the original thing, showing you how ridiculous all those other movies actually were. They kind of tricked us into thinking they were good. They tricked us into thinking that they had a point to make about the world at all, but they were just conventional, empty movies all along. um, I think parody works very well in film because it's a medium for a mass audience. A lot of films are the same, so you have that element of repetition to be mocked. But parody is not just confined to film. You'll also find it working in music. This guy's still going around. He was a big deal when I was a kid. Weird Al Yankovic, he makes these parody songs of very popular music like Michael Jackson or Eminem, and they're actually quite good songs in their own right because he takes the original melody, the original beat, and he rewrites the lyrics in a very kind of clever, funny way. He makes these music videos which imitate the original artists in a smart, funny way as well. You'll find them all over YouTube. Just go watch one of his songs and you'll see what I mean. Um, and that's the thing about parody is that it's not just copy, paste, laugh. It's copy, repurpose in order to get people to see the original thing in a whole new light. So there is actually a lot of artfulness and skill in creating a parody. It's light stuff. It's meant to make people laugh and enjoy something, but actually it's quite hard to do, and it requires quite a lot of talent and skill in order to bring it off. So as you maybe go around looking at different examples of parodies, you can appreciate this more. Let's get into the actual book, Cold Comfort Farm, and what makes it a parody specifically. The book has a plot, unlike some of the other modernist texts we've been doing. The book is more conventionally narrative because it has a more conventional narrative structure to it, a beginning, a middle, an end. It has characters, it has a plot. Unlike The Wasteland, unlike Mrs. Dalloway, and Turn of the Screw as well. It is a pretty straightforward story, except for the fact that it is a parody. The plot of the book is that the young heroine, Flora Post, is a young orphan and a quote unquote parasite looking for somewhere to live because her parents have died. She has no means, she has no money, she has to find a way to live. So she moves to a farm called Cold Comfort Farm, where her rural relatives live. Their name is the Stark Adders. The Stark Adders live this very grim, depressing, difficult agricultural life. They are people of the earth. They farm. They're uneducated, and they endure all of this great perceived suffering. But Flora enters the story, enters their lives, and she's completely indifferent to all of it, thinking that it's largely exaggerated and made up, and that she alone can bring order to the Stark Adders' messy lives. And over the course of the book, that's what she does. She comes in with kind of very cheerful disposition, and puts things to right. The reason the Stark Adders are so unhappy and live such a grim life is something we'll get into now, because that actually is the target of the parody. So just put a pin in that one for so long. Because in order to understand that, I think you kind of need to be able to imagine how other books could be parodied in a similar way. You won't have been familiar with Cold Comfort Farm, and as such, you're not going to be familiar with the things that Cold Comfort Farm itself was making fun of. As I was saying a few minutes ago, a parody can only work if the audience is aware of the thing, of the original text that is being made fun of. It needs a reference point, right? A parody just in a vacuum, without any context, without that reference point, is still a parody, but it's not going to be a good one because it won't land with an audience if they don't know what the thing is making fun of. if they don't know what expectations and conventions are being overturned. And that's actually the case for us with this book that we're studying, that we as readers are not familiar with the things Gibbons was making fun of. So it requires a little bit of knowledge and an imaginative leap in order for us to get there. Okay. So as a thought experiment, just think of some other books you've studied over the course of our degree together. Like Jane Eyre and White Sagacity, I think might be good examples here. Both of these are examples of books that are of a particular genre and time. Jane Eyre is a kind of a Victorian Gothic literature, which is again, a very particular genre. It has certain features. It does certain things. We, as readers, we expect it to be about a particular series of events. It's also very serious and quite dark and gruesome. Like Jane Eyre doesn't have a lot of jokes in it. The characters all have to kind of suffer a lot, have great difficulty. Things are constantly going wrong for the characters for no real reason other than they happen to be alive, right? And as such, the book can be very enjoyable because we enjoy reading about human suffering, but it can also be very weighty, perhaps unnecessarily weighty. People read a book like Jane Eyre and it conditions them to think that this is what life is like. Life is hard and difficult and brutal, and people suffer all the time. That's the nature of things. We get our ideas from story about life from stories like that, and stories generally are quite serious things. It's not a lot of comedy stuff out there, especially not anymore. It's not like a lot of funny movies anymore. Things are generally very serious. And that the seriousness of our popular culture becomes how we understand the world as well. Okay. But a writer like Gibbons will come along and say, actually, no, that is not the case at all. The world is not as serious as Charlotte Bronte makes it out to be. The world is not as terrible and as awful as Jean Rhys makes it out to be in White Sagacity. These are writers who want to concentrate on misery. They want to dwell on misery because they think that that is what makes for a serious work of art. But they are wrong. Actually, life is full of funniness and absurdity and ridiculousness. And in order to have a balanced view of it, we need books that actually make fun of all of those serious tropes that have been created in the canon and to overturn them for a mass audience in a way that provides a more actually balancing or tempered view of the world. Okay. And that's what Seligman is trying to do. She's trying to take something very, she's trying to take things people think are serious and therefore true and say that no, not only are they not serious, but they're also not true. They're untrue. They're a misrepresentation of the world. And through parodying it, making fun of it, I'm going to correct your understanding of what's going on in the world. And that's her goal, okay? What she's trying to do is take all of these tropes and cliches that have been created by literature and undermine them, overturn them, subvert them in a way that parody enables her to. So it becomes her tool, her means to kind of create a corrected vision of how life actually works, right? So this book, compared to the other modernist texts we're doing, is very different in tone. For one thing, it is packed full of jokes. It is a parody on the one hand, yes, but also has a lot of kind of verbal humor, funny imagery, over-the-top characters, and a lot of just clever language that leads to good jokes. You'll find this all over the place. Like here's just a good joke. Bicky, who had a shocking stammer, talked a great deal, as people with stammers love to do. Um, so it's not a book that tries to be serious in the way that Mrs. Dalloway is serious, or The Wasteland is very serious. We were talking about The Wasteland a few weeks ago and saying how Eliot's trying to give us this extremely important idea. Gibbons is not trying to do that. She's on the other end of the spectrum. She wants to entertain us, amuse us, make us laugh. But I think her book also does, in fact, have a slightly more serious goal or target. Okay. Parody, like satire, always has a target. It's trying to hit something. It's trying to pop something or deflate something or point out the absurdity or ridiculousness of something. It's trying to point to something in the world that is a misconception or something that is actually ridiculous or is a lie, and make all the rest of us laugh at it, right? That's also what Gibbons is trying to do. But what is the book a parody of? What is she making fun of? Perhaps if you've read the book a little bit or researched around it, you might have discovered this. But what she's trying to do is, again, this is not something that you would be immediately familiar with. And it is it's always a bit of an issue when I teach this book, trying to get students to understand the original target she's trying to hit, right? What she was trying to do was to write a parody of the English farm or rural novel, okay? Kind of like Jane Eyre, maybe even Turn of the Screw. When Gibbons was around in the 20s and 30s, there was this extremely popular genre of novel called, it was kind of like a soap opera set on farms. It was called the Loam and Love Child genre. Basically, the very dramatic, melodramatic, over the top, very serious story of people living in the English countryside as farmers. And their lives in these stories were very often characterized by difficulties, suffering, poverty. They didn't have any education. There was violence and crimes and incest and people dying. Very often these books were written by quite upper class educated people, and they were writing stories about people of a lower economic station than they were. And what they were doing is probably completely misunderstanding what living in the rural English countryside was actually like. So you had the situation where the cultural representation of the real thing was completely wrong. And that's what Gibbons was trying to do, is to show her audiences that this genre of storytelling they uncritically loved so much, and which was very popular to read, was actually totally disconnected from what life was really like. And that's what Comfort Farm is trying to do, is be a parody of that novel of English rural life as written by an educated upper class English person. And as you'll see, the characters in the story actually behave unknowingly in all the ways that these novels used to depict them as behaving, right? And what the heroine of the story, Flora Post, does is that she comes into this world and she actually points out to the characters, and therefore to us, the readers as well, how the ways they are all behaving are silly and actually are just made up storytelling conventions created by people who didn't know any better, who didn't actually know the world they were writing about and therefore got it wrong, and have tricked people into thinking that this is an accurate representation of the world. And that's why her book, when it was published and released, was extremely popular. because it was kind of a revelation to people. At last, somebody had come along and actually burst this bubble in a surprising way. And it's also a book that's remained very popular, interestingly enough, to the point where hardly anyone who reads it now and who enjoys it now has any knowledge of those original things the book is parodying. So in a way, the book is actually so good on its own terms that it has outlived its own attempt to be a parody, which is kind of an interesting thing. So you don't really need to know, for the purposes of this module, you do, but just as a normal, ordinary reader, you actually don't really need to grasp or see the original joke in order to get what, in order to laugh at the jokes that Gibbons tells us along the way, because the jokes kind of stand on their own as just being very good, clever, interesting writing. Some of the features of these jokes you'll see if you pay attention to the names of people and places. She does the thing where she kind of names the characters and the places they live in as being kind of mockingly connected to their characteristics or something about the place. The title is a joke itself. Cold Comfort Farm. Cold comfort means to be like when something gives you cold comfort, it's like a consolation, but it's not a very good consolation. All right. So the character kind of gets to the fact that these characters live on a farm called Cold Comfort. It's a horrible place to be. By the end of the story, they all realize that it's actually not a horrible place to be because Flora Post and Gibbons have corrected their vision of it. But all these other things like Howling Speed Cop 2, which is the name of a car. The name of the farmers are the Stark Adders, which is a very kind of visceral, harsh, hard name. Aunt Ada Doom, Adam Lamb's Breath. There are these cows on the farm who have names like Graceless, Aimless, Fectless, Pointless, Big Business. There's a church scene in the book, and the church is called, the flock at the church is called the Quivering Brethren, because all the people are literally God-fearing. They're afraid of their own religion. And all these other things like how nature is described as well. If you look at, say, page 22, you'll see how this parodic naming works quite well. Before Flora goes to the farm, she says that if she finds that she has any third cousins living there who are named Seth or Reuben, she will decide not to go. And then her aunt says, why? Oh, because highly sexed young men living on farms are always called Seth or Reuben, and it'll be such a nuisance. Her husband is almost certain to be called Amos, and if he is, it'll be typical farm. And you know what they are like. So before she even gets there, she's able to tell the reader exactly what people are going to be called, because that's what they're always called. In these kinds of books, they always have these sorts of names. And Flora, who has read all of those books, knows exactly what's already going to be coming her way. So the book imitates other books, and it's in presenting this imitation that she's able to find a lot of her humor. And if you sort of skip ahead to page 33, you'll get a description of the misery of the farm. And this kind of, the way she uses language and imagery here is very over the top. It makes it extremely serious and kind of ridiculously serious, in fact, too serious to be taken seriously. And in that kind of tone, that attitude, that writing, we need to see where Gibbons really brings out the best of herself as a writer, that she's highly aware what she's making fun of, and in so doing is also making the audience highly aware that she is making fun of something at all. She's using parody as a tool to kind of make us alive, make us conscious of the ridiculousness of the genre she's lampooning. And that's where the book is going. That's what it's about. I'll make another video on this in due course. Probably not sure when I'll be releasing these, but I'll release them probably all together at the same time. And if you have any questions about them, you can discuss them with me in class. You can probably hear my cat meowing at me for attention. So I'm going to go sort him out, and I'll leave it here for now, and chat to you guys again soon. Until then, make sure you're reading the book, because no matter what I say in class, if you've actually read the book, if you know what it's about, if you're familiar with the content and everything that happens, you are always one step ahead of the game. Okay, I will see you guys again soon. Cheerio.